Hi, hello. Today we are talking about the Shirobako movie. This came out in Japanese theaters quite a while ago, like 2019 maybe, and the actual Japanese Blu-rays and fan translations have been out for quite a while too. But I was waiting. I didn't want to watch it yet, even though I'm a huge fan of this property, because I thought there was an outside chance that once COVID died down, it could play in theaters near me. And it actually paid off. I got to see this in the theater. I thought it would be a great movie to see in the theater, given that it's all about the art of making an anime movie. And it was, indeed, so good. Hooray. Wow, it was so good. As I expected, I loved Shirobako, and this is just, at last, more Shirobako. If you want to learn all about my love of the original series, you can watch my top 20 anime of the 2010s videos, where it appears quite high up on the list. You can skip to the last part if you want. I guess that's a spoiler, but that's where it is. I get in pretty deep... Hey, stop scratching that. What? You know you're not supposed to scratch that. I cover in pretty deep of why I think this show is so brilliant. If you don't know, this entire franchise is about the anime industry itself. It follows these characters as they get jobs in different parts of the anime industry. The main cast, one is a production assistant, that's the main character. One is an animator, one is a voice artist, one is a CGI modeler, and one is like a story writer. And you get to see how their career paths play out across all of the trials and tribulations of anime. This was really great to see in the theaters too. I had so much fun. I met up with some friends. And there's a lot of stuff that operates on like a really satisfying semi-meta level. That sweet spot where it's like kind of charming, that you're like, oh, cute, they're talking about this, and then it's happening in the movie, but it's never really pointed, it's never obnoxious, it's never like winking meta stuff. But scenes near the end, this is, I suppose, a spoiler, but a really unsurprising spoiler, that there's some scenes near the end showing people watching a movie in the theater. It's like, wow, I'm in the theater too, wow. The novelty of being in a theater hasn't really died down since my long absence from there due to COVID, so... Oh my goodness, what? It was a great celebration of such things. Just relishing in the joy of seeing the transcendent success of unseen similar struggles. That is, we watch them try so hard to make an anime movie, and then we're watching an anime movie, and we know... You see the cat, like, took off. We know that the people who made the Shirobako movie went through such struggles as well. You're watching them make a movie, and it's tough, but you're watching a movie about someone making a movie, so they did it, you know? That sort of meta reciprocal type proving of success I find really, really powerful. My only complaint is that there should have been more. Why couldn't this just be a full third season? There's so many characters I wanted to see more of, so many scenes that could have been extended. Oh, you're like really worked up, aren't you, kitty? It's like running around. Maybe he wants to play. Yeah, the pacing was quite a bit faster than the show, which makes sense, because we're going from a 26 episode anime to a normal length movie, and covering, if not the same amount of events, enough events for it to be like a similarly significant story arc. But I think this really could have only worked as a movie as well, in terms of the story they wanted to tell and how they wanted to tell it. And this, I guess, gives us some really good insights on the cinematic mode, why some things work better as movies than they would as a TV series. Yeah, there was quite a few scenes that I really couldn't picture fitting into a normal 22-minute episode. That is, they would either have to be like 70% of one of the halves of the episode, or extended awkwardly to a full half, or cut down that there were only like kind of half of a half so that they could be like the kind of climactic... You're caught on a wire, you dummy. No matter how they did it, they wouldn't really be able to make, say, like a 16-minute sequence fit into an episode well. Or like a 12-minute sequence. Like, what is that? Do you try to awkwardly put that all before the commercial break? I don't know. And I find in these sorts of sequences, because they break away so much from the tone and the mode of the scenes around them, Like, there's this fairly long musical number, there's a whole sequence in this kid's animation class, which is totally disjoint from the rest of the movie in terms of kind of like tone and mode and stuff. That if they tried to kind of structure this within an episode, it would be such a kind of domineering force for the trajectory of that episode that they couldn't really do anything else within it. But the movie gives these scenes like a chance to really go into their own mode without it needing to influence everything around it, if that makes sense. A long sequence of many scenes that doesn't necessarily have a payoff or climax, entirely set up, but of course, because there is no actual payoff within that sequence, it couldn't constitute an entire episode. But here it's fine to have that as just a component of the movie. And this kind of sounds obvious, I think, if you really think about, this is just how it has to be, and therefore it's not some great insight either on the part of the filmmakers or the part of me studying it, that this is how it turned out. But I think this really does capture this idea of the cinematic mode. And I keep using this term in the context of my beautiful dark twisted fantasy that operates in a cinematic mode. This is an album by Kanye West, and every time I talk about it, the cinematic quality of it. And I think a lot of the same things apply to how this album is constructed and how really cinematic albums that are thought of primarily as albums instead of a collection of songs are thought of. I've said this 3,000 times. This freedom in sequencing. Another big thing is confidence. You have your audience's complete investment at every point of the movie, rather than in a TV show where you have to kind of re-earn that investment at the start of each episode, and you can only pay it off for the duration of that episode. It exists on a spectrum. Some TV shows are very, very serial and expect you to be binge watching it or consuming it as if it was almost a movie. They can get away with it more, but this is something quite key, I think, about television traditionally. And the absolute guarantee of intra-movie sequence spacing, that is to say, they know you haven't taken a week-long break between episodes, or a month-long break, or you've watched them back-to-back. All of those things are possible if it's disjoint sequential episodes, but instead if it's one unit of a movie, they know that you saw the setup for a scene exactly 20 minutes before the payoff, say. And this, I think, really allows this kind of freedom in sequencing because they know exactly what kind of impact the choice and arrangement will have. Okay, that was just a brief aside because this sort of stuff interests me. I don't know if it interests anyone else. These are the sort of things I think about a lot. Why do some stories work in some formats and not others? But what kind of story are we telling here? Well, it is a story of revenge. And I think this is an excellent example of what I've been thinking of as the revenge plotline. This is something that I really praised the recent anime Zombieland Saga Revenge for brilliantly executing. Essentially, the way this sort of plotline works is you have the characters at their highest point at the end of the previous part, the previous season, the end of Shirobako, but then between that one and the current one, some disaster strikes off-scene. And the drive of the new story is to reclaim that forward glory in revenge. And they said the word revenge in the scene where they're trying to convince the director to get on board. They said the word revenge. And I was like, yes, it's a revenge plot. And in Zombieland Saga Revenge, they were always talking about revenge and revenge. We gotta get back. We gotta reclaim our glory. We gotta show them that we're not failures. We gotta undo the damage we've dealt to ourselves. That kind of thing. So seeing the characters at their very, very low point is good comedy. It can also be a very powerful driver of pathos and empathy. Gets you into a point where you really feel connected with the character, and yet you're also able to laugh at the character. And this is pretty smart when they need a super clutch, emotionally devastating scene. Like, let's say there's some sort of crisis, someone has a lack of faith, they get really worried about something, somebody needs to be like traumatized in order to advance the plot, to add some spice. They can remember the events of this great downfall. We've never seen it before because of this time skip, so it can be shocking to see the characters so devastated, to see what befell them. But we already know the after effects of this devastating incident, so it isn't overly dramatic. We're not preoccupied with the idea that, oh goodness, are they trying to convince us that this is the end of it all, that the characters could die even, or that this will irreversibly create a rift between them. We already know that that didn't happen. We've already seen just how badly this screwed up the characters. And instead we can focus entirely on that characterization. We can focus just how on the characters are reacting and really take that in for our understanding of the characters, and not be caught up in like the melodrama, the feeling that, oh, this is going to be like a twist. This is going to be like setting up something and thinking about it in terms of like plot. I really can't get over how brilliant a plotline like this is in its functionality. It just does so much. It does so well with like characterization. It does so well with like motivation and setup. And just the way that you can build a story around it. You get like all of these amazing scenes basically just for free. And you might think, what's so different between this sort of story and another story that might be right at the start of the series of the characters getting on their feet and achieving glory for the first time? Kind of seems the same, right? They're starting from a very low place, and then they work really hard, and then they achieve glory. And both this and Zombieland Saga had that as their opening story. Like, it is, in that sense, like a retread. But in thinking about that, you can really tell that there are pretty meaningful differences. With the Revenge, they've already been there once. They've already achieved their goals once before. So the problems preventing them from returning to that state of glory are much more like acute, and the plot line to convince them to return is a lot more precise. That is to say, instead of trying to inspire someone that perhaps has this great talent, but they're unsure if they can do it, they have motivational issues, they don't know if they even want to, instead it's like they've been there before, and now they're nervous about returning because let's say they have financial obligations and they think this is like too risky. So now it's a much more precise thing to solve their problem, which is sometimes a more engaging story, and it's a story that can take advantage of that character's unique characterization more. And it's like more of a kind of like a focused story where it's much more established, like the stakes of we need this guy back because they're so good at whatever, but they're hesitant to return because of whatever. We're going to solve that problem, and then we will be empowered in a way that we already know about. Because, when they actually do convince the former ally to hop on board, those scenes are the best. You get the rush of the full memory of the full power of your memories of the character, all the things they're capable of, all the good times you've had with the character before, what they'll be able to add to the team. Your excitement for the whole project just grows and grows because you know now you're going to have this character on board for the whole duration. And this movie, I think, really brilliantly spaces out these scenes at this really powerful rate that I kind of thought they were going to, expend them all too quickly, that there was a lot of sequences right near the start of just reconnecting with people and getting them on board. And I was like, oh no, these are my favorite parts. It's all over. But they just keep having those cards in hand as a surprise, a lovely welcome surprise, just to boost the movie forward right before it starts lagging. That they can say, guess what, so-and-so is back. Guess what, so-and-so has decided to join. They just kept peppering it in. It was so fantastic. And by the time everyone is on the same team, you can relish in a feeling of empowerment and triumph. And this allows you to kind of navigate towards a very unilaterally happy ending where your team achieves all of their goals and is kind of happy indefinitely, and there's no major like tragedy or sacrifice, let's say, without it feeling ass-pulley, because you've situated it right at the point of feeling most empowered and triumphant, where you've invigorated yourself with all of the memories of the series up until that point. And so you'll accept that, yes, this team can do anything. This is a structure that I think you can probably think of many, many examples of in all sorts of mediums. And generally, this is a very popular plot, and I think this is why. Like, it just works. And it allows you to get to this really powerful, cathartic, happy ending without, needing to actually write that much complicated stuff. It's a very, very simple plot, but I think it really, really works. Another concept that I think this movie illustrates really well is what I would call the plunge. There's a sequence that I absolutely loved, perhaps my favorite in the whole movie. That's tough to say. There's a lot of really amazing sequences in this movie. The let's make an anime musical, where our main character, Miyamori, decides that she will indeed go ahead with the project. I cried at the end when it was getting really sentimental about all these different anime projects, ones that you'd seen her working on in the series, and then just other like hypothetical ones that had been kind of like iconified, such that you understood what kind of project they were, all through different eras of anime, all through different styles of animation. There's even stupid fan service ones, but even that was getting me sentimental because you realize that even the stupidest fan service anime has like a lot of passion behind it. And what it really made me think of is this concept in storytelling that I like to call the plunge. I think this is an excellent example of that. And I realized that this is what was happening in the storytelling, and that made me appreciate this scene even more. So the character, when they take the plunge, shifts from the rational mode established by their characterization. That is, Miyamori is a rational, smart, intelligent person who makes decisions that line up with the evidence she's had before and her preferences and motives and stuff like that. And it breaks away from the established plot points that led them to some path of behavior. That is, everything she's said and done so far indicates that she should not be trying to make an anime movie, that they do not have the resources to make an anime movie, that if they try to make an anime movie, it will be a repeat of the failure of their previous attempt to make an anime series. Even though they have every reason not to, the character takes the plunge. They make a choice to instigate the next part of the plot in an almost magical moment. And that's what it really comes down to, is that if the character behaved rationally the whole time, there wouldn't be a movie. Like, there wouldn't be a story to tell at all. They have to have this break from their rationality for something extraordinary to happen that we want to see depicted, right? This is true of pretty much every movie. That if the characters behaved totally rationally, they would just probably stay at home for most of the adventures and stuff. But there's this plunge, this spark, this almost magical interior transformation where they get kind of caught up in the moment. They get caught up in the potential of their own plot. And it almost feels like a plot hole or a break in the logic of the storytelling, which is true. It's just something that has to happen for the plot to happen. But if it's depicted in the right way, if it's made compelling and you feel like you want to take the plunge as well, it can be some of the most powerful moments in the entire series. This is a plot element that I thought of in the context of Yuri manga a lot, where there's scenes where the character accepts the confession of the other and they start their lesbian relationship, or they accept within themselves the reality of their feelings. Oh, it's true, I really do love this girl. Or just some other mode of life outside of their expected life trajectory. They think, yes, the depth of my love is such that even though everything I know and everything I've done up until this point is telling me not to, this transcendent force of love has convinced me that, yes, I will take the plunge. I also think about it in the concept of Hamlet. Hamlet, I think, is an extremely classic, extremely excellent version of this trope, this plot element, whatever you want to call it, where Hamlet has every reason to just keep sulking and to privately believe that his uncle killed his father but not really act on it. And yet he chooses instead to believe in the ghost of his father, which he encounters, to believe that what the ghost speaks is truth, and to believe that he indeed has a responsibility, duty, and destiny to avenge the death of his father and expose the conspiracy of his uncle. That is really him taking the plunge, and it's exemplified in the most famous monologue in the entire play, the to be or not to be. That's him basically contemplating not just, am I going to bother continue living, which is kind of the first layer of reading, but will I take the plunge into the maddening reality of the Shakespearean world of ghosts and conspiracies, or will I remain a rational, human-like human, and probably not get stabbed. I wanted to make a video called Taking the Plunge in Bloom Into You and Hamlet. I don't know if I'll ever get to it, but essentially it would be talking about this plot element and how it appears in all sorts of genres and how they distinguish themselves. And I had a lot to say in this video, which is making it kind of intimidating, so who knows if I'll ever get to it, but at least I kind of explained what it would be about in here. We'll also do the self-excluding paradise of slice of life at some point. But yeah, continuing on talking about this sequence, the plunge is, of course, that against all reason, Miyamori agrees to make the movie. This is not depicted through conversation, although she does speak with the former president of the studio for a little bit, and he gives some inspiring words about, what kind of anime do you really want to make. But it's not that in that conversation she convinces herself, nor is it that she has some explicit expressed realization that she says, oh yeah, you know what? I have to do it because I remembered something from my childhood, or I have to do it because I've reconsidered it and I realized how much it would mean to me, or any other externality that, I've decided to do it because a childhood friend of mine contacted me and she's dying and I really want to make this movie before she dies. None of those are what changes her mind about making the movie. Those sorts of things contribute, but they really don't suffice. It's very clear that she still doesn't want to do it, even taking into all of those things. Instead, the decision is made during this hallucinatory musical sequence, where suddenly her little plushies that she carries around with her and kind of imagines talking to and talking between themselves to work through her problems. This is an element throughout the series. Those come to life and start marching with her. And they all start singing a song about making an anime together, and then all these other anime characters appear, and it's really, really wonderful. And it's during that time that it's transformed, that she goes into this musical sequence against making the movie, and she emerges from it wanting to make the movie. And this idea of the magic of storytelling, the story advancing, that is, even though the characters don't want to do it, the plot has to happen, so characters act rationally, being accompanied by a magical transcendence of the reality of the diegesis, that we're not just seeing real life depicted anymore, but this fantastical imaginary space where Miyamori's understanding and her vision of anime is being depicted as alive, as singing, as dancing. I think that's just really brilliant and really powerful. To accompany those two things together and to have this as a celebration of the choice she is making. And then, this is really excellent, there's a drinking sequence where she gets really drunk with another producer almost immediately after, and the whole time they're just like, why did we agree to do this? This is such a terrible idea. All the other producers are the worst. We can't count on anybody. This is gonna be hell. So it's not like suddenly it became a good idea. It's not like anything actually changed in her mind. She just had this moment of taking a plunge. So all these themes that the movie espouses, both in the movie itself and in the movie that they're making, which I think is fun. Nothing is impossible, so you might as well try. There's no reason not to follow your dreams. You gotta make your own miracles. And those seem kind of at odds maybe with this idea of a transcendent epiphany. That is to say, how can we expect a moral message to resonate with us when the characters have experiences we don't have access to? So it's one thing for Miyamori to say, yeah, follow your dreams. But the reason she followed her dreams is unavailable to us unless we take like a military grade hallucinogenic. That she's able to have this evocative, overwhelming experience of seeing anime figures dancing around her and convincing her the joy of making anime. So how are we supposed to, take her at her word? This is something I complained about in stories before. I remember the ending of season 1 of True Detective really bothered me, because one of the characters, I won't spoil it too much, but one of the characters has like a major epiphany, changes the way that his entire worldview operates. He goes from being a huge pessimist to an optimist. And it's because he has this life-threatening near-death experience that we as the audience cannot connect to or relate to at all. We don't have access to what that actually changed in his mind. just that he comes out on the other side of it a different person. And it seems like bullshit, right? But here, though, I think it works because the sequence is just that good. Such that even though we cannot have the experience Miyamori is having, the experience we do have watching the sequence is so good that you feel like you can believe in that sort of transcendence too. And I think this is the requirement for characters taking the plunge. If you're going to do this, if you're going to write your story around a character behaving irrationally because the plot has to happen, you have to have that moment of taking the plunge be really, really powerful, be really evocative, really put all of the emotions that the character is feeling also in the brain of the viewer. Only then does it make sense. Only then does it feel satisfying. And I think I'm going to think about a lot of media and really try to place that into these categories. Hamlet, of course, another example. This powerful, brilliant, soul-searching, deeply psychological speech of to be or not to be. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well, a fellow of infinite jest. All of that emerges as Hamlet making this plunge of discarding his rationality and accepting this sort of transcendent fictional destiny. And a lot of Yuri's stories too, that moment of accepting their feelings, of receiving the confession, of choosing to discard the safety of their predetermined life and plunge into something new, are among the best moments in the series. They're really beautiful, really touching. And I think that's why it works. And something like True Detective, where he's just wheeled out on a wheelchair and he's like, you know what? Maybe the light is winning against the darkness. It's like, you know, I don't know. It's something to think about. The beauty of an incestuous medium. I don't mean that kind of incestuous, although anime has a lot of that too. I'm not going to be talking about the beauty of that. I'm talking about just the idea that anime is a medium made by anime fans. Miyazaki has decried this in some interviews as what's ruining anime and making it like an otaku cult instead of just a legitimate artistic medium. That all of the animators these days grow up watching anime and they don't grow up watching life. So anime is now this reflection of a reflection. And probably by now a reflection of a reflection of a reflection. And it is a pretty niche industry, I think, largely because of that. Because it's so within itself. And of course I'm putting aside the biggestest, mainstreamistest things. Shirobako is fairly popular. But I would say maybe Shirobako is at the top of popularity among things that I'm talking about. And it really is. I think people underestimate this because maybe they have some like awareness of anime because of, you know, internet osmosis. And again, I'm talking about like otaku type anime. And they assume that it's huge in Japan because there are so much merch and there are so many hardcore otaku. But even in Japan, people don't generally watch this stuff. It's like hyper nerds that watch it here or in Japan. It's a very, very small but passionate niche. And the people that make it are not making a lot of money. They're not really getting famous. They're not really getting cultural credit. They're not getting, you know, an Oscar or anything. They're making it because they're insanely passionate and just generally insane, and they love anime. They love anime. There's no way that you would ever work in this industry if you did not love anime. Oh, my mouse just warped. And again, the people who watch it are watching it because they love anime. There's no cultural capital that you can accumulate by being an anime fan. You're not going to be watching anime to fit in. Again, I'm talking about niche otaku and anime. Maybe you'll watch Attack on Titan to fit in, but you know, watching slice of life, watching pervert shows for perverts, you're clearly only doing that because you genuinely love it. There's no other reason to, especially if you're buying merch, especially if you're buying $100 Blu-rays. You're in deep. And this movie is about that deep, deep brain disease and the people who share it, the people who sacrifice their lives to make anime. And it's a joyous celebration of why people develop that passion in the first place. All the tributes to the many eras and style of animation, the children's animation class, the samurai sequence near the end that I don't want to spoil, but it really has a feeling of why not? Why don't we just do that? All these little Sakuga flourishes where the characters just You can tell there was so much delight in animating them and bringing out their personality in all of these excessive, comedic, wonderful movements. And it could only be from within, from so deep in this Hall of Mirrors, this feeling of community, the depth of knowledge, the assumption that everyone involved is as passionate as you. It made me think of a moment when I left Comiket for the first time. It was the first day of my first Comiket that I attended, and there was a huge screen up on one of the walls of Big Sight. And it was thanking people. It was all these clips of anime characters thanking you. And here, of course, in context, it meant for supporting the industry, for supporting creators, for supporting the doujinshi artists. Even though, of course, the clips were from all over, all sorts of series, and they were saying thank you for whatever reason. The passion of all those animators carrying forward to thank all these consumers, this mecca of otaku, and it was really, really beautiful. And I felt this was like a similar sort of celebration where you have this tiny incestuous little group. Again, I gotta stop using the word incestuous because it sounds so gross. But I mean, tightly knit to the point of detriment is the other meaning of that word. That in those moments you can sometimes have perspective on, we've been together like this for so long, only helping each other out. That's kind of beautiful. I don't know. That's pretty much all I had to say about this one. I don't have a whole lot to say. Besides that, it was just really good. It's really great seeing the theater with my friends. I cried a few times. It's not a surprise. I cry a lot. I don't think it was as good as the best parts of the anime, but it stands up there. It's not, that much worse than my favorite parts of the anime. But really, though, this is the warm-up for another movie review that I'm working on, that I have a lot more to say about. Yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna talk about it. That's right. You know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna talk about Rebuild of Evangelion 4.0 Thrice Upon a Time. Got a lot of shit to say about that one. We're gonna talk the hell out of it. I think it's gonna be like 3 hours long. And maybe we'll talk about the Green Knight first. I don't know. Alright, that's it.